We'll call this voice snippet Stalking Part 2. Before I explain some of the things that I experienced, let me give you a bit of a definition of what stalking is. I found this on an article written by Maggie J. Hall. The article, written on a blog about safety and protection, actually recommends how to stop it and to know if it's happening to you. Okay, so here goes. Stalking refers to harassment and intimidation tactics used by a group of individuals against another person or toward a smaller group of people. People may initiate this type of civil offense because they are intolerant of another person for numerous reasons, which might include differing beliefs or lifestyles, jealousy, or racial prejudice. Stalkers generally design the covert method used for psychological harassment to exact revenge, coerce silence, or cast out persons having opposing views. While stalking is considered a misdemeanor in most states, this is for the US, the offense carries felony penalties in others. The number of people involved in the gang varies. Individuals might receive intimidation from a handful of people in a work environment, or they may be targeted by an entire community. Victims relaying claims of stalking perceive the attackers as well-organized groups of people who not only communicate with one another in a certain location, but also pursue the target in other areas by means of extensive contacts. Leaders generally enlist the aid of other individuals in the group by various methods, which typically include providing false information about the victim, manipulating potential members, or employing those with similar criminal backgrounds. Victims may be from any gender or socioeconomic background. These persons may outperform other coworkers or have a set of standards that separates them from other people in an environment. Stalking frequently uses practices meant to destroy the victim's qualities. These acts might include blaming the target for a member's mistakes or taking credit for what the victim accomplished. In an effort to discredit a person or to add to the weaponry for the attack, stalkers may perpetuate the notion that the target is mentally impaired or dangerous in some manner, forcing the person to undergo evaluation. The list of physical attacks used against victims generally includes stalking behaviour and unwanted attention. The majority of persons under attack report that stalkers frequently mirror the victim's behavior. Stalking might include mirroring physical gestures or verbal comments, which actually happened to me the other day with my neighbor and a man who lives in an area. So they're watching this or listening to these online. Many victims relay that members often enter or leave properties and other locations at the same time as the target. Victims also frequently report that stalkers often repeat private conversations occurring in a home environment or over the phone. Stalking targets might also experience hang-up calls, spam calls, or calls from wrong numbers throughout the day. Attackers may enter homes illegally or employ the assistance of targets' friends or family in an attempt to confuse the victim or cause them to doubt their own logic and reasoning. Stalkers often rearrange or steal personal items in the workplace or home. The criminal offenses of stalkers may become more aggressive or violent against a target. So this is one of the very detailed explanations of how stalking is carried out. So after seeing this happen over the last 10 years, there's a few things that stuck out over the years, and A lot of them are connected, some are isolated, but it's the fact that it actually happens that's very disturbing. So one would ask, okay, well, you're saying, this is how stalking happens, but why would anybody stalk you? Well, here goes. Sometimes if you're present in a space where people may not like your type or kind, let's say if you're a woman, or let's say you're a visible minority, or let's say your opinion's different, what they'll want to do is push you out. So that could be like, for example, when you live in a specific neighborhood and maybe it's all men that live there and there's a female neighbor and they don't like women, they will try to do it to make you feel uncomfortable where you live so that you can move. Another reason why it's happening is if you're vocal and outspoken, or you set boundaries in terms of like not accepting male advances, or you don't share too much information about yourself, the stalking will be done in a way to make you feel uneasy to be there, either to force you to communicate or talk with them or engage with them, or to push you out because you refuse to give any kind of attention to or speak deeply or have detailed conversation with them. For people who have family members who are part of stalking, because that can happen too, where family gets involved, oftentimes the stalking is done in a way to affect your health and wellness, or your stability, your day-to-day stability. And they want to sort of keep you from achieving goals or getting a good job or having a balanced life. And that's often done in tandem with people outside of the family. Now, as I was reading more into how stalking is done and why it happens, I discovered some really interesting things, and I'm not too sure if it's connected to my situation, but what I found, which I don't know who this has happened to, is I'll call them underground groups, not related to music, by the way, who target people in the industry or the scene or the community who bring a different energy to the environment. So let's say, for example, it's a workplace and you're a high performer when it comes to sales, let's say, and you do really well because you're very talkative and you're communicative and you're high energy and you're happy-go-lucky, let's say. When you enter into that workplace and you bring this energy to the environment, someone may see you as competition, let's say, and maybe they've always been a high performer, or they've always been well liked by everyone in the group. So what happens is now they need to find a way to get you out, to destabilize you from making them look a certain way just by your presence. So the goal in this case with stalking is to make you underperform. If it gets really ugly, what they want to do is cause you mental distress, or in some cases disease, which I'll get into more in detail in the book. And then what they'll want to do is create uneasiness with you so that you lose your confidence. And then maybe you're not performing as well as you can. And then the next level of that stalking and all the tools that they use within that is to get you eliminated. So one of the things that I found, which was really, really interesting, is I'll call them acquaintances that I had around me who were part of this scheme of stalking. They kept suggesting that I leave the city or I move away. And I thought that was really, really interesting, that that was something they kept suggesting over and over again. So I don't know if it's part of the tactics to get you to move out of the way, so that if you are looked at as competition with any other people within the vicinity or in the environment, they're telling you you should leave because you will not be successful in whatever you're doing, or, whatever you're aspiring to. Another reason why I believe they tell you to leave or move is because they've seen the same thing happen to other people who've challenged the status quo with their presence, and they feel that because the group is bigger or the presence is stronger than your own, you're not going to be able to be strong enough to stand up to whatever already exists in the space. So to me, that's another way that they try to suppress or oppress whoever they see as a threat or competition. And another thing that they do when it comes to stalking is that if they see that you're still moving forward, because 10 years is a long time to go through a lot of stalking. So once I recognized who was involved by seeing their presence in various places around the city, I just would ignore it and keep living my life. But at a certain point, they see that it's not working, so they ante up the types of techniques that they use. And that's when I realized that I was being targeted. One of the things I noticed was my phone kept getting spammed. And when I say spam, it's not like regular advertising text messages. The spam I was getting was like 50 to 100 texts a day. Some of them were, actually, I'll say 90% of them were sex-based text messaging. So text messages for like sex chats. A lot of them were ads for soliciting for sex. It was really, really strange. And so I've had to change my number, I think, 5 or 6 times in the last 7 years, because even if I would block a lot of these texts, they kept coming through, and I would block and block and block, but there's only so much you can do. Another thing I noticed with the stalking is that 9 times out of 10, it was usually men. It was always men. And I found that disturbing because it showed me like there's a problem in society where people don't know that they're taking part in something that is actually, it's not even about me per se, but it's showing like how much society has changed and the way that people operate in order to suppress people or an individual in society. So I thought, that was an interesting observation. So, as we progressed, I mentioned I noticed in 2013, 2014, things started happening. So my car was spray painted. The bolt on the access from my car was removed. So my car could have disengaged, and I'm a pretty good driver. I've never been in any accidents. So the bolt was removed, and I remember my car going into the shop, and the mechanic was like, that someone took out the main bolt that holds the frame of your car together. And they were like, how did you drive with this, with your car going through this? And I really didn't know, my tires were flattened. I was followed home by a stranger, and luckily a neighbor in my old neighborhood followed the person following me on my way back from my after hours job at Lily Lounge, and she said she saw me walking really fast, but this person was hiding behind trees and bushes and they were following me, and she set her dog onto him. And then once that person ran off, she escorted me to my house. Another situation, my gym bag with all my clothing was stolen at the gym. And it just continued, like, back to back to back, a couple times a year. Something strange was happening. And I think one big clue that it was tied to a group effort was when I would post that such and such had happened to my car or to my clothing at the gym. Someone from that group that's been harassing me all these years would like my post. So I realized, like, wow, like, it seems like they have it out for me, but why? What's the problem? What's the reason? And so it started escalating when, here's an example. In Toronto, we have, they're called pedestrian Fridays, I think, pedestrian Saturdays at Kensington Market. It's a really fun place to go. And I'll never forget, I went out there one afternoon, and the ringleader of the group was at the event. And I think that the ringleader of the group that I'm talking about, he would be at something like that. But the one thing I noticed is wherever I walked around the area, he would follow me around and make his presence known. And by me seeing him at that event, I realized that he had been behind most of the things that had happened to me. And even then, I still didn't quite understand why, until I looked at all the work and the things I was doing building up to my career. And I realized that he might have seen me as a threat to him. And so he wanted to do everything he can on the sidelines to try to make me feel uncomfortable to be where I was. And it didn't really stop me from doing what I was doing, but I started paying more and more attention to how it was being done. And about 2012, 2013 is when I started writing down everything that was happening. And it's often recommended to write down every event as it happens, so that when need be, you have proof and details of who was there and why it's happening and what was going on. I'll go into more detail about how it happened, but after going through this amount of stalking and following around, there are some things I decided to place in the book to sort of give or equip people who are going through this in a way that they can protect themselves. So here's one. Don't share places you'll be if there are events, parties, any kind of city celebrations. Do not share your whereabouts. Do not accept invites. Do not tell people where you're going, what time you're arriving. That's one. Another one. Don't agree to arrive or confirm any places that you've been invited to, because oftentimes the person who's setting up the intimidation or intimidation tactics, they want you to confirm that you're going to be there so that they can actually send people to hover around you And sometimes they're not in it to do anything physically to harm you, but they are in it to intimidate you. When you're looking for a job, let's say, for example, because the stalking and intimidation kind of permeated into my work life. So when you're looking for work or a job, try to find out a little bit more about the company and the organization you're working for. Because what's happened to me in the past, one or two people who are part of this group, they actually worked for some of the companies that I worked with. And so that was a way they were able to watch me on the job and try to destabilize my work. So unfortunately, that's part of it. If you're a sole entrepreneur and you're working for yourself, be very mindful of who you work with and the kind of information you share in your collaboration. The reason why I say this is because when you are working with people, if you work in a people-centered business, sometimes they want to find out what you're working on or what you're doing so that they can step in and kind of mess up what you're working on. And to me, these 4 or 5 pieces of advice I give you is a way for you to just at least be more self-aware of your environment and your surroundings. Finally, when you're living your life day to day, it's so important to understand the environment that you're in, because understanding where you are helps you to protect yourself. It adds an extra measure of safety in terms of how you're going to live your day-to-day life. And then it also protects you from those around you. But follow up with me and read the book, because I go into more detail about how stalking operates, how intimidation operates, and how the network is set up so that they can destabilize your life, your personal and your public life. Thank you.